Hello and welcome to the Association for Coaching podcast and for this Boost Your Coaching Business series. For this new series, I'm your host, Rob Lawrence, and today I have with me someone who I believe will help you to think about your coaching services and how to sell your coaching services in new and interesting ways. So if you're struggling with cash flow, managing your finances, or looking for ways to review or adjust your pricing, keep listening as I hope in the next 30 minutes or so, you'll learn some new insights and tips to help you take your coaching forward. So with no further ado, I'd like to introduce to you my guest today, Alisa Barkan. Alisa, welcome.
Hi, Rob. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Great to have you on the series. So from what I already know, you've got a fascinating backstory. For our listener, can you offer a sense of who you are and what it is that you do in the world today?
Yeah, sure. I am a financial coach and business mentor, and I work with qualified or soon-to-be qualified coaches who want to build a successful coaching business. I don't know if my backstory is fascinating, but as you can probably tell from my accent, I'm not originally from the UK. I was born in Romania, and I guess it would be interesting for people to know that when I was born, Romania was still a communist country. So my upbringing was very different from the people who grew up in the UK or in other Western countries.
Wow. So tell me about that upbringing and how that kind of has led to what it is that you do today and how you approach what it is that you do today.
Yeah, as a child, I think I took things as they were. But even so, or maybe in hindsight now, I realized it was a pretty harsh reality growing up in a communist country. First of all, food was scarce, so we didn't have much choice in terms of what to buy. For example, when we went to a store, like if people can relate to what it was at the beginning of the pandemic when we would go in a shop and the shelves were all empty, that was kind of my reality for a few years growing up. And it was a very different dynamic, linking it to financial coaching if you want, because, you had money and you had nothing to do with it because it couldn't buy you the things that you needed, including food and clothes. And I remember it took my parents months and months to find furniture for my bedroom because you couldn't buy any. Everything that was produced in Romania was exported. And finally, when they found some furniture, it was like 500 miles away from where we lived. And the only reason they could buy it was because it had some sort of fault and it was rejected for export. So that was the reality. And as a child, I remember I saw money. We held it very visibly in our house. So I saw it in the drawer where it was being kept. And I had my own money, earning it through going to sing Christmas carols and so on. And I was proud to have that money, but I didn't really know, what I could use it for and what to do with it other than count it and put it back where I took it from. So certainly money didn't have the purchasing power that it has today, and we didn't give it the importance that people give it today.
That's fascinating, and what an interesting upbringing you had. I'm curious to know, in the context of what it is that you do today, how that early relationship that you developed there, it was such an interesting reflection that I heard there in terms of your relationship to money. How has that formed your relationship to money today as an adult and somebody who's essentially now living in the West in a more capitalist type environment?
Very early on, I kind of learned not to rely on money primarily to get something, whatever it is that I wanted to have. So I describe this by saying that my parents have raised me in the spirit of resourcefulness rather than resources. I didn't have many resources, and the ones that I did have couldn't do much for me. So therefore, I had to find it within myself to make things possible some way or another. And, I didn't find this strange or unusual because we were all in the same boat, right? Everyone was the same. until I moved to the UK. I moved here in 2009, and it quickly became apparent to me that my relationship with money was very different to other people's who lived here. And because very early on, I was able to buy a house in the UK. I started investing, and I didn't earn a lot of money either. I had a graduate role. And compared to my peers and even people who were higher up on the career ladder, let's say, I was reaching goals, life goals, a lot quicker and with less money. So it kind of struck me then that, hold on a second, what I know here is different, and people are not used to dealing with money in this way. And perhaps I have something that is valuable to other people, for them to see a different way of how money works and how to use it and how to not get so involved emotionally with money, and to rely more on yourself than you rely on it.
That's really, really interesting. I love what you were saying there about how you were reaching your life goals quicker than other people. I'm curious to know, what are your secrets? I imagine our listener is listening to this thinking, gosh, Alisa must have some secrets here in terms of how she relates to money. And what was it that you did? What is it that you feel you did that enabled you to reach those goals quicker than other people?
Well, first of all, I think it was the idea that it is possible. You don't have to reach certain stages before you can go on to other ones. You don't have to earn a lot of money to afford to buy a house or to get on the career ladder or whatever. Secondly, and something that I tell my clients as well, we don't all chase the same goals. And I don't have to conform myself to someone else's definition of success, or otherwise I won't be successful myself. Some people want certain things and others don't, and that's absolutely fine. And I hate that society makes us think that if we are not successful by ticking certain boxes, then we're not successful at all. I think that we can decide what successful means to us and what it doesn't. And when it comes to money, I mentioned here not involving emotion. I treat my relationship with money in a very, almost like a transactional way. So I would compare it to a partnership. I respect money. I acknowledge its purchasing power, but I never let it make decisions for me. I treat it fairly because I take care of my money, but I'm not in love with it. And therefore, I'm okay to let it go. I'm okay to spend money knowing, having the certainty actually that it will come back, because this is what I have experienced as a child. And please don't think that I was rich growing up and I had a lot of money and it was always something that I saw in abundance. That wasn't the case. However, I always had money in my pocket. It was just something that happened as we grew up. And of course, I was taught by my parents to save money for a rainy day. And there are a lot of rainy days in Romania when I was growing up. And I look at it as energy. Like everything else, money is also energy. And if you think about it like that, all the negative self-talk that you have around money sounds ridiculous when you replace the word money with energy. I don't deserve money becomes I don't deserve energy. Really? Who doesn't deserve energy?
Yeah.
Or money is evil, energy is evil. Well, yeah, it can be dangerous if you use it improperly, but it's not evil in and of itself. And so it's about perspective and how you look at it. And also, I would say, in this partnership with money, I am the partner with more shares, and therefore I have more decision power. And that's how I like to look at it.
I love that. And I really understand what you're saying there about money being almost a static equivalent of energy that's in motion, I suppose. What I was hearing there was a really interesting definition of success and the importance of defining success in our own terms. And I know as coaches, that's something we talk a lot about with our clients, and it's important for ourselves to be clear on what our goals and our aims are. I'm curious to know, you touched upon having certainty there about if I spend money coming back. I know that many coaches struggle with their own finances and cash flow and pricing. I'm curious to know, from your work with coaches, what do you see as their biggest challenge? What are some of the bigger mistakes that you see coaches making when it comes to managing their own relationship with money?
Yes. Well, I can tell you what the biggest issue is because they tell me when they want to work
Right.
with me. And probably the question that I get asked the most is, I don't know how much to charge. How can I determine what my prices will be for my coaching services? The industry is not regulated. We don't have guidance for this. How much do I charge? And a lot of them stay in this employee mentality of charging on a per hour basis or a per session basis. Well, here's the truth. People are not buying an hour of your time as a coach. If you were to tell a potential client, okay, so for this coaching, you'll pay me X, and then next time we'll spend another hour together and you'll pay me the same amount, but this time we will play Scrabble. And they'll say, no, actually, I don't want to pay you the same for spending an hour with you to play Scrabble. So obviously, it's not your time that they want from you, it's something else. And it's understanding what is it that you bring to the table with your coaching that will help you with pricing. And of course, once they have an idea, okay, this is the range that I could be looking at pricing my services, there's all sorts of mindset issues that come with that. Who am I to charge this much? My clients cannot afford it. I don't have years of coaching experience, so how could I possibly charge this much? So on and so forth. And, I think that what we see on social media, and this has become such a cliche, but it doesn't help. You hear these coaches and gurus and whatever they call themselves advising people to charge what they're worth. And there's all sorts of confidence issues that come with that because of the association of our worth as individuals and inevitably our self-worth and our prices. They should be separate. There is no way that you could quantify someone's worth as an individual, as a human being, because that is infinite. So no matter what your prices are, you're never going to be able to charge your worth. So why don't we put that to the side and actually think of the pricing equation with less emotion, with less involvement from us and our value, and with more of a logical approach to it and a bit more research around the market and demand and alternatives and substitutes and so on.
So there's lots of stuff in there that I heard, and it's really interesting, isn't it, how we get emotional about our pricing and we're putting our clients first is what I was hearing there in terms of what can they afford, who am I, what am I worth, whereas actually what we ought to be looking at is what results are we looking for, what are those results worth, and therefore what's the value proposition and how much should we charge for that value proposition versus it being a sum that's agreed upon because of what somebody is worth.
Yeah, absolutely.
Taking a more logical approach to our pricing, what's a typical set of steps that you would take a coach through in order to help them develop a pricing strategy that is based less on emotion?
Yeah, I would start with research on the market, and that includes your ideal client, starting with who is it that you want to work? What kind of problems do they have? What is the cost for them of not solving those problems? And what's the value that a solution via coaching could bring? Mm-hmm. Also, research on the market itself, right? What is the demand for a particular type of coaching? What are the substitutes and alternatives on the market? But of course, there's a bigger problem that comes with this, and that is people not wanting to niche and to actually choose a specific area of coaching that they want to operate in. But, that would be the first step. But you cannot put a value on something until you know what is it that you are offering. So therefore, I will work with them to put together a strong value proposition. I see a lot of coaching offerings that focus almost entirely on features. You get this many sessions with me and accountability calls and email support in between and, messages and all the features that come with that. But they don't talk a lot about the benefit for the client and what is the value that coaching can bring to someone struggling with a particular problem. If you're going to coach inside of an organization, they will probably be looking at the ROI of the return on investment that, what they're paying for coaching will bring them. And there are certain ways of calculating that. And then, of course, there's the mindset work that I would do with them, removing themselves from the pricing equation. Instead of pricing the service, some people price themselves and their own value, as we've just discussed before. And that brings in a lot of self-confidence issues and so on. When you see, well, in the grand scheme of things, when you see selling as matching a solution to a problem, then charging, you see it as a transaction to justify the exchange of value. Pricing only becomes quantifying the value of what you are offering in exchange for what people are giving you, are paying you in terms of monetary value. And the value that you offer should always be higher than the price that the client is paying. And if that's the case, you will not have issues selling your coaching services.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's fascinating. So what I'm hearing there then, it's more about emphasizing the benefits rather than the features of the coaching services. Is that correct?
Yes.
And would you say that it's better to leave the pricing conversation to much later on so that you can get very clear on what the problem is that you're trying to solve with your client as a coach, and getting lots of detail around that so you understand what the value is to the client, and then starting to have a conversation around pricing once that's established?
Well, I think so. There's two phases there. I think there is step one of you becoming clear what is it that you offer and how you can price that based on all of your research. And for some people, depending on the type of coaching that they do, there might be an element of actually creating some sort of bespoke packages or negotiating, especially if you do bigger projects inside of organizations. They might have their own requirements and their own things that they want you to incorporate into your coaching and so on, and put together a program like that. Mm-hmm. And in that case, the price would change. For people who are working with individuals, so not necessarily inside of corporations or companies, I would suggest having a price and knowing exactly what led you to the price, so that you can then have a negotiation and a meaningful selling conversation, knowing that you have a backing to fall onto. And then there's the question of, well, when do you have the pricing conversation? At the end, when people say, okay, so how much would this cost? And you tell them the price and everything, that's the biggest fear, right? Everything crumbles down and they say, oh, but I can't afford that. So for that reason, I advise people to give at least an indication of what the price might be. If you don't want to make it public for whatever reason, give a range or an indication. This is a 4-figure investment or whatever, so that when you do get clients through the door, they're not actually really excited to work with you, but practically speaking, they have not got the funds to pay for it. Because it saves you time and it saves them time, and it saves an entire conversation that wouldn't have happened if the client knew what the price was to begin with.
Yeah, I really like that idea of giving some kind of indication or range up front there, so there aren't any surprises further down the line. And I can also see how that could probably save some time in the negotiation process at that point. I'm curious, I know a lot of coaches, and I've faced this myself at times, where sometimes the very first question a new client, somebody I may have not heard from or met before, their first question is, how much do you charge? And I was going to ask you whether people you work with also face that same challenge, because I'm often a bit stumped with that, because I often customize my own pricing depending on what's required. And sometimes it's a little bit difficult to answer that question if I'm not clear about what we're going to be doing together, if that makes sense. So I'm curious, first off, if other coaches that you work with experience that. The other thought I had around that as well, and which I really liked, by the way, was your point there about being clear on what your pricing actually offers. And I think that comes back to what we were talking about earlier in terms of confidence. I guess once you've done your research and you've got really clear on what your pricing is and what it is that you offer, if you're offering packages, actually it's a lot easier to negotiate because you know the value inherently of what's being offered. And if there are any challenges around a particular price, then at least you know where you stand, rather than kind of making a price up on the spot, which is what possibly some people do.
Yeah. Yeah, so let's go back to your first point. Yes, my clients experience this, and I experience it as well sometimes. When someone comes and the first thing they say into a call is, "Well, how much do you charge?" First of all, I don't see why I wouldn't tell them. So,
Yeah.
like we said, depending on the type of client that it is, if you need to have a conversation to come to a price depending on what they're asking, then you would say that. But if you already have a price, I wouldn't then go into, well, let's see first, so what is this and what would be the value for you? People don't like that. It sounds salesy and whatever. And from my point of view, a discovery call, which is essentially a sales conversation, should not feel like a sales conversation. It should feel like a conversation to see whether what I have to offer is a match for the problem that you're struggling with. So if I tell them from the beginning, well, it will be this much. And then they say, oh, it's not really, that's not, wow, that much. Then we can end the conversation then and there, because if they're not going to be convinced from the beginning, I'm not going to try and convince them. If they come to me with the question, how much do you charge? They're likely either just testing to see how much it would be. Maybe they're bargain hunters. Maybe they have a very specific budget, and I really want to be within their budget if we're going to have the conversation. And if not, then we don't do it. Another thing that you can do is whenever someone books a call with you, you can send them an automated message via or even send them a message manually if you don't have a scheduling tool, where you would say, just to give you an idea of what you can expect, here are the things we're going to talk about in the call, whatever. And you can mention the price in there as well. Mm-hmm. And if they're really not into it and they can't afford it, they are going to cancel that call, and that's fine too.
Yeah. And I like what you were saying there about that kind of efficiency, I suppose, in terms of coming back to your earlier point. It saves everybody time. And from what I was hearing earlier as well, it saves any surprises further down the line. So being upfront about that and being clear on at least the range, if not the specific pricing itself, can save a lot of time.
Yeah.
And so it's perhaps important then for new coaches to do some research, get clear about what it is that they're offering, and get clear on pricing appropriately for the services that are being offered.
Yeah.
So on that, you have to be careful about how you price in terms of being able to pay yourself. It can be quite tricky to balance how much of your time is chargeable time versus the time that's required to actually deliver the work, and also have some time off, recreation time, weekends, evenings and stuff like that. I certainly know of coaches that have underpriced themselves, and I probably did this too, actually, thinking back now to my earlier days, to the point where you end up overworking, underpricing, and you just have to keep working harder and harder to make ends meet, or make sure you've got enough money coming into both the business and your own pocket. So what are some of the ideas and tips that you've got, Alisa, in terms of pricing appropriately, but also making sure that you're paying yourself well, I suppose?
Well, it's interesting. Before you get to do that, you have to allow yourself to believe that what you do as a coach is actually, I'm not going to say worth the money, because of course it is, but I see a lot of coaches who have this ethical dilemma when they think, well, is it like, I'm in the business of helping people, right? Is it ethical to charge people for help? Doesn't that negate the definition of helping someone if you're being paid for it? So there needs to be some mindset work done around this, and thinking that, just because you are helping someone, and a lot of coaches describe what they do starting with the words, I help people, or I help whoever do this so they can do that, right? Mm-hmm. Yes, it's still worth it. Even if you call it help, it doesn't mean that the help is less valuable if you are charging for it. And I see a lot of internal battles and ethical dilemmas around this. And to be honest, I had it in the beginning as well. I thought to myself, well, is it really fair to charge people? So when I was working as a personal finance coach, is it ethical to charge people who have money issues? Is that the right thing to do? Wouldn't they be better off not paying me at all and using that money to pay down their debt, etc., etc.? And, I had to do more research on my ideal client before I realized that no, they wouldn't use the money that they would pay me to reduce their debt, because if they had that good money habit of paying off their debt, they wouldn't need my help in the first place. And so they were going to use that money anyway, either to work with me or to purchase another service or product or to add to their debt, because, they were actively looking for a solution. So they're going to buy it from somewhere, right? And I didn't force anyone to work with me. So in the end, I had to decide, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm not going to accept to work with people who intend to pay for my coaching services using their credit cards, because I didn't want to add to the debt. But I had to come to terms with the fact that working with me is money well spent. And the more you work with clients and you see the results that you're helping them achieve, the more you realize the value that these people get for the price that you are paying, that they're paying you. And that's the first step. I think before you can talk about, okay, how am I going to pay myself first and make sure that I pay myself well and so on, the question is, how am I going to accept that I need to pay myself doing this? Because a lot of coaches, they absolutely love coaching. And they think, well, if I love it, should I be paid for it? And it's a very interesting dilemma, which I am sure a lot of the people listening can relate to. But going back to the numbers, if you want, I would advise people to make sure that whatever business model they have chosen for their coaching business is conducive to their goals. When I tell my clients that they can expect to only spend about 30% of their time coaching, they go, excuse me, what? Because given that time limitation and their prices, they realize that actually they cannot meet their financial goals even with the full practice. So that would be step number one. And as they progress into the business, it's very easy to confuse being busy with being successful. And you think that if you have a full plate, well, that's it. You're on your way. You're doing well and so on. Being busy is one thing. And then being efficient means that you're crossing off a lot of the things on your to-do list. But you're looking at outputs. How many social media posts have I released this week? How many articles have I written? How many videos, etc.? That's fine. But being efficient is not the same with being effective. And in order to be successful as a business owner, whether you're a coach or not, you need to be effective. You need to ask yourself, are my actions taking me closer to the results that I expect? And if not, you're only fooling yourself with efficiency, with outputs, but your outcomes or your results are not what you hoped for. So don't get sucked into this whole, okay, I'm going to release content and I'm going to do all of this and everything else that I see on social media other people doing. You have to be very clear. What am I trying to achieve here? And have I set some smart goals for myself? Is it easy for me to know when I have reached those goals? And a lot of people, they set goals, but they're not as tight as they could be, or they only set goals that they know they could achieve. So I have a whole theory around goals, and I have a couple of resources that we could link in the show notes. But be very clear about what your goals are. And don't be afraid to set financial goals and to set financial goals for yourself and for the business. It's very easy in the beginning to confuse yourself with the business and to think that if the business is doing okay, then I'm doing okay. Well, you need to pay yourself as the business owner, right? So the business might be doing okay, but actually, if you need to reinvest that money, if your costs are really high, regardless of the revenue, you are not doing okay financially. So the way that I work with people is I look at building a successful business through the lenses of financial viability. And the question I ask people is, well, is your business able to sustain you and itself financially long term? And if it's not, we need to go back and look at the business model and change it until it does.
Got lots of notes here on my page about what you're saying there about efficiency versus effectiveness, being busy versus being successful, and the importance, and we should know this as coaches, the importance of having smart goals, but also if we're not keeping ourselves accountable, perhaps having a coach of our own to keep us accountable with those goals as well. With that in mind, what's some of the best guidance you've got, coming back to what you were saying there about having a profitable, I suppose, business, but one that can also pay you? What would be your best guidance for someone looking to develop a solid bottom line for their business?
Do a lot of research. Begin with a lot of research and know exactly who is it that you can help and how you can help them. And not, a lot of people choose a niche because they are told that they have to, and therefore they tick a box and they say, okay, I've done this now. Can I move on to the next thing? And 2 months later, they wonder, why are not clients queuing at my door to work with me? And it's because you can't really skip this step. You have to know in detail who is it that you work with, what is it that their problem is, and how you can help them. If you have those things and you have a platform where you can express how you can help people and you can give them value and share knowledge with them, eventually you will build up enough credibility so that when someone lands on your page or when you have a conversation and you contact them, they see relevant stuff, relevant for them, so that what you have to offer is attractive to them. I see this a lot. We believe once we know coaching and we see how valuable it is, we think everyone knows what coaching is and understands it, and of course they will want to buy it. That's not the case. A lot of people still don't understand what coaching is, and they're not looking to buy coaching. They're just looking for solutions to their problems. So if you're missing this very foundation of building a coaching business, which is knowing what your niche is, everything else will kind of crumble down, because there are a lot of dependencies that stem from having a niche. What your offer is, what kind of marketing channels you're going to use, the marketing strategy that you will have. Content creation will be influenced by your ideal client and how they like to learn and to get information and so on. Your pricing as well, because there are elements that you need to take into account. And one of them is, what is the level of disposable income that your client has, or if you're working with a corporation, what kind of budget do they have available for this kind of engagement? So all of that will become extremely important to building a successful coaching business. A niche is not forever. You can change it like I did, but people need to get to know you for something before they trust you enough to help them with something else. So that would be my first advice. If you want a solid bottom line for your business, you cannot build it on a shaky foundation. You have to have this piece of work in place, and you need to do your research before. And after that, it will be making offers as often as possible, talking about what you do in a relevant way for your clients and in a language that they use to describe the problems that they have and the ideal solutions that they're expecting. And after that, once you get a bit more established in your business, I say this all the time, even if you have an accountant or a bookkeeper that deals with your finances, you still need to have a minimum level of financial awareness, because that is what is going to inform your decisions. Every single decision that you make in your business will have a direct or an indirect financial implication. And, if the listeners are wondering if I'm an accountant, yes, I am. And I'm going to always preach for people knowing their finances and knowing what the numbers in their business are telling them. And I have written about this numerously, and I have YouTube videos about it as well. But I think it's your job as the business owner, if you want to grow that business, if you want to make more money and so on, you need to look at what the numbers are telling you and make decisions that are informed by that story that the numbers are telling, rather than having a hunch or having a dream or whatever. Intuition is important, but data doesn't lie.
So in summary, what I was hearing there is do your research and take responsibility for the numbers. Have some level of understanding, and if you can't understand the numbers, get some help, is what I was hearing there, so that you can at least understand the numbers to an extent where you can make some good decisions around where the business is going, and maybe even reviewing that context as well.
Absolutely.
Great stuff. Okay, there was lots in there and some brilliant tips in there. So thank you very much for those. You mentioned choosing a niche there and sticking to that niche, or niche for our North American listeners. There's a lot of talk about niching down. So what's your view on that idea of niching down? How much success do you see coaches having when they stick to a very specific niche, for example?
I think the terminology there is a bit misleading because niching down can be off-putting, and it is for a lot of new coaches because they think it will reduce their chances of getting clients. But the reality is that until you choose a niche, your message and your content and the conversations that you have will be too vague to attract clients. I don't know if you've noticed this, but I see a lot of coaches who describe what they do by saying, I can help you change, reach your potential, live your best life, thrive, etc. It sounds good, but nobody is being kept awake at night because they have not reached their potential. So only knowing your coaching niche and ideal client in great detail can a coach ever get familiar with the language that the potential client is using to describe their problems and their solutions so that they can use the same language and put together a compelling coaching offer. And I've mentioned earlier the dependencies between niche and other areas in your business. And I think having a niche to begin with is extremely, extremely important because people need to get to know you for something and to trust you to help them with that something before they can ask you, what about something else? So the idea is that you go narrow first, and once you become a little bit more known and trusted as a professional in the industry, you can definitely add more things to your repertoire of services and expand a little bit into doing other types of coaching if that's what you want. But in the beginning, having a niche is actually what is going to ensure that your marketing is on point. And without on point marketing, you cannot get clients. So I see a lot of success with people who do decide to niche down, as we call it. And I don't see a lot of success with people who are reluctant to do this. And until they do it, they struggle with messages that are too vague, like the ones I've mentioned earlier.
You're obviously very passionate about your own niche, Alisa. What is it about the work that you do that you enjoy most?
I enjoy seeing that people who are extremely passionate about coaching, but who are not extremely passionate about business, can actually make an impact with their work, because this is why they started the business. This is why I started the business. I wanted to make a difference. I wanted to make an impact. But that just doesn't happen in a second after you have qualified as a coach. And there's a different set of skills that you need as a coach to be able to succeed in your business. And that is what I teach my clients. That's what I coach them on. That's what I mentor them on. So when you receive an email from someone saying, I've reached my number for whatever month, and it's only the 10th of the month, it just gives you this sense of, okay, and this is the impact that I'm making, actually. And, I have expanded my work because I wanted to make more impact. So now I do courses and all sorts of things, but it gives me satisfaction to know that in a noisy world where you see everyone on social media saying, oh, and you need to do this and that and the other and so on, I can be, how can I call myself without sounding, while sounding humble? I think that it's reassuring for me to know that people can work with me and get solid advice that is based on my experience, that is based on working with other people and helping them achieve what these clients are looking to achieve, and that's build a successful coaching business, and that they can do it with someone who is not well, how can I put this so I don't offend people? But you know the girl bosses that you see online, and the boss babes and the gurus, and that just doesn't resonate with me. And I don't think it resonates with a lot of people who are qualified coaches and consider themselves to be a professional. So I pride myself with bringing professionalism to the mix, as well as a personable, approachable human being, but one that has not gone too far into the whole hashtag culture and hustle and bustle and everything that we feel that we need to do these days, because social media portrays it like that.
I love that, Alisa. That's really insightful and really wonderful to hear. And you've obviously got a lot of energy and passion for this type of work. And I'm guessing that a lot of what you're talking about here is, when it comes to money and pricing and cash flow and all the rest of it, is about maintaining your own energy, which of course perhaps leads to being more confident about what you do and appropriately selling your services.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it comes with practice, and the more results you see your clients achieve, the more confident you become. But it's also not about that only, because your clients' results are their results. You shouldn't get attached to them as a coach. And when you're new to the practice, it's really quite difficult, especially if those results are not exactly what the client would have hoped for. So the work that I do with people is also around the mindset element of, not attaching yourself to your client's results and kind of having that detachment as a professional, even if you've grown to kind of have a relationship with your client that is more than just coachee, and maybe you feel like you're friends with them or whatever. You're still a professional and you're still running a business, and that should not escape your mind when you are doing your day-to-day job as a coach, but also as other roles that you need to play in your business, including the CEO, the CFO, and so on. So I really take a holistic approach to working with people. The mindset element and the confidence of it and the boundaries that you have to put in around your work are a big part of that.
Amazing. There's so much to talk about. So you mentioned earlier there were some resources that we could link to in the show notes. Could you tell me a little bit more about those resources that you are offering for our listener?
Yeah, so I have a YouTube channel. My YouTube channel is dedicated to learning more about what it means to start and run a financially viable coaching business. So that's where I share usually no more than 10 minutes of what might be considered mini trainings in a video format, of course. But I also have publication on Medium, which is called Coaching for a Living. And as the name would suggest, that publication is dedicated to coaches who want to make a living with coaching. And I share a lot of written content on there as well. So those would be the two main ones that are very content heavy. But of course, I am also active on LinkedIn, and I have an email list so people can join my newsletter and receive emails from me twice a week, where I also share tips and tricks around money mindset, business mindset, how to run a business, and so on.
You've got a webinar coming up with the Association for Coaching very soon. Could you give our listener a sense of what to expect if they want to learn more?
Yeah, sure. It's a 90-minute webinar called How to Sell Your Coaching Services, and it will be on the 12th of April. And without giving too much away, we will look at why people pay for coaching and how to convince them to buy from us. And we will talk about what is it that you need to have in place even before you try to sell coaching. And we've touched upon some of these things today. We'll spend some time talking about what makes a relevant and attracting coaching offer, how to conduct effective discovery calls, but we will also touch upon money mindset and pricing psychology. So it's going to be a good one. And if anyone's listening to this before the 12th of April and they're a member of the Association for Coaching, there's still time to sign up for free. And I look forward to seeing everyone and talk about the subject that I know many coaches struggle with.
That's fabulous, Alisa. Thanks for sharing that. I will certainly be there. I'm just finding everything that you're sharing today absolutely fascinating. So really insightful, really useful. Finally, where can folks find out more about you and how can they best connect with you?
as I mentioned earlier, for those looking for more information about starting and building a coaching business, you can find me on YouTube and on Medium, where I run my publication, Coaching for a Living. And from there, you'll find ways to connect with me on other platforms. But if you just want to visit my website, that is thesavvycorner.com. And if you want to connect on LinkedIn, you'll find me there as well. And I would love to stay in touch with anyone who found this interview interesting and wants to find out more about how to build a successful coaching business and how I can help.
Thank you so much for your time, Alisa.
Thank you. It was lovely. And yes, time flew. I can't believe the interview is over now. But yes, it was really pleasant. And I hope it was useful for the listeners as well.